The first helicopter came in low over the parking garage, and for one full second, I thought the hospital was under attack. That's the only way I can describe the sound, not the polite thump of a medevac chopper easing onto our rooftop pad, but the deep, chest-rattling pulse of two military Black Hawks descending onto the visitor lot of Cape Fear Regional Medical Center like they owned the sky. Windows shook. Car alarms went off in sequence, one after another, a chain reaction of panic. Nurses pressed their faces to the break room glass. Security guards reached for radios they didn't know how to use for something like this. And I was standing in HR Director Diane Foster's office, holding a manila folder with my own resignation letter inside it, and signed because she had told me, to sign it before lunch. "Sarah," she said, not even looking up from the paperwork, "whatever that is outside, it isn't your problem anymore." That was the exact moment the office door opened without a knock, and a man in dress blues with 3 silver stars on his shoulders stepped through it like he'd walked through that door 100 times before, though I had never in 11 years at this hospital seen a general set foot in Diane Foster's office. He looked past her. He looked past Dr. Marcus Reyes, who was leaning against the filing cabinet with his arms crossed, already smiling the smile he wore whenever he thought he'd won something. He looked straight at me. "Captain Whitfield," he said, and his voice cracked, just slightly, in a way that 3 stars on a man's shoulders should never let it crack. "I've been trying to find you for 6 years." Diane Foster's mouth opened. Marcus Reyes's smile died on his face like a light switched off. And I just stood there, holding a resignation letter I never got to sign, wondering how in God's name my whole life had come down to this one impossible morning. To understand how we got here, I need to take you back. Not to that office. Further back than that. 3 months earlier, I was nobody. That's not self-pity. That's just fact, and I'd made peace with it a long time ago. To the doctors at Cape Fear Regional, I was Sarah Whitfield, RN, night shift, Bay 4. 34 years old, quiet, efficient, never late, never dramatic. I brought my own coffee because the break room stuff tasted like scorched cardboard. I wore a thin silver chain under my scrubs that nobody ever asked about, and if they had, I would have told them it was nothing. A habit. Something I couldn't take off even after I stopped needing to. It wasn't nothing. It was a set of dog tags that didn't say Whitfield. They said a name and a rank I hadn't used since I signed my discharge papers at Womack Army Medical Center on Fort Liberty 6 years before, the week after I came home from my 3rd deployment and decided I was done being Captain Whitfield of the 82nd Airborne's Forward Surgical Team and ready to just be Sarah. Nobody at Cape Fear Regional knew that. Not because I was ashamed of it. Because I was tired of being defined by it. Tired of the way people's faces changed when they found out. The way they either treated you like glass or like a war movie prop. I wanted, for once, to just be a good nurse. Nothing more, nothing less. Which might have worked out fine if Dr. Marcus Reyes hadn't transferred into our trauma department that spring. Marcus was 39, board certified, and the only son of Preston Reyes, who sat on our hospital's board of directors and whose family foundation had just finished funding an $11 million cardiac wing with his name etched into marble at the entrance. Everyone in that building knew who buttered whose bread, and Marcus knew it better than anyone. He walked the halls like the floors owed him rent. The first time he corrected me in front of a patient, I let it go. Doctors do that. It's part of the ecosystem, mostly harmless, mostly forgettable. The second time, 3 weeks later, he did it in front of the entire trauma bay during a code, raising his voice to tell me I'd hung the wrong drip, except I hadn't. I'd hung exactly what the attending, Dr. Okafor, had ordered 10 minutes before Marcus arrived and decided he wanted to run the room his way. I didn't argue. I just quietly switched it back the second he walked out, and the patient did fine, and nobody ever knew there'd been a problem, because there hadn't been one, except the one Marcus invented to make himself look sharp in front of a family watching through the glass. By June, it had a rhythm to it. Small comments in the hallway about floor nurses who thought they knew medicine. A joke at a staff meeting about how some people peaked in high school and never left. Nothing you could take to HR. Nothing you could prove. Just enough, every single day, to make you feel 2 inches shorter by the time you clocked out. I never fought back. I'd learned a long time ago, in places far worse than this one, that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most dangerous. I watched. I documented. I kept my own notes in a little spiral notebook I brought from home, dates and times, and exactly what was said, because some habits you don't lose even when you leave the job that taught them to you. I had no idea, that June, how badly I was going to need that notebook. I had no idea that 4,000 miles and 6 years away, a man I had once kept alive with my own 2 hands on a dirt floor in Kandahar province was about to become a 3-star general, and that he had never, not once, stopped looking for the medic who saved his life and then vanished off the face of the earth. His name was Walter Combs, 81 years old, a widower, a retired Army sergeant who came into my ER every few months for the same tired heart that had carried him through Vietnam and 40 years of factory work afterward. I knew him, not as a chart number, as a person. He liked to talk about his late wife's biscuits. He called me young lady, even though I was 34 and starting to find gray in my part. On the night of July 9th, Walter came in with chest pain that felt different, he said, than the usual kind. Sharper, wronger. I triaged him myself, flagged it urgent, got him on monitors within 4 minutes. Marcus Reyes was the attending on call that night. I told him what Walter had told me. The character of the pain, the radiation into his jaw, the sweating that had started in the ambulance. I recommended, respectfully, that we move straight to cardiac workup rather than wait on the standard queue. Marcus looked at Walter's chart for exactly 11 seconds and said, "He's a frequent flyer. Give him the usual cocktail and put him in observation." I didn't argue with a doctor in front of a patient. I never have, but I stayed close. I checked Walter every 15 minutes instead of every hour, because something in my gut, the same something that had kept me and men twice my size alive in places with no ambulances, no backup, no second chances, told me this wasn't a usual night. At 2:47 a.m., Walter's monitor screamed. I called the code myself. I started compressions myself, because the resident on the floor froze for 4 full seconds, and 4 seconds is a lifetime when a man's heart has stopped. Marcus arrived at 2:52, and by then I had already gotten a rhythm back, already had the crash cart positioned, already had the story of the next hour half decided by what I'd done in the 5 minutes before he walked in. Walter Combs survived that night. Barely. He spent 9 days in the ICU and came out with a triple bypass and a story he liked to tell every nurse on the floor about the little lady who wouldn't let him quit. That should have been the end of it. A good outcome. A save. Instead, for days later, I was called into Diane Foster's office and shown a chart, Walter's chart, that had been quietly amended. Amended to show that the initial triage assessment I had performed at intake was incomplete. Amended to show that critical symptoms had gone unnoted for over an hour. Amended, in other words, to make it look like the reason Walter Combs coded was my failure to recognize warning signs that I had, in fact, walked directly to Marcus Reyes and reported in real time. Dr. Reyes has some serious concerns about the standard of care in this case, Diane told me, sliding the amended chart across her desk like it was a mirror I was supposed to see myself in. "We're placing you on administrative leave pending review." I sat very still. I have a talent for sitting very still when everything inside me wants to come apart. It's a skill you learn fast when panic gets people killed. "That chart is wrong," I said quietly. I flagged the cardiac symptoms at intake. "I have the timestamp." I told Dr. Reyes myself. Dr. Reyes has a different recollection. I looked at her for a long moment. "Pull the security footage from the nurse's station. It'll show exactly what time I spoke to him and what I said." Diane's jaw tightened in a way that told me everything before she even said the words. "The footage from that hallway has already been reviewed as part of a routine system maintenance. It wasn't retained past the standard 72-hour window. 3 days. The chart had been amended within 3 days. The footage had disappeared within the same window. That wasn't carelessness. That was a plan. I drove home that morning in silence, and for the first time in 6 years, I took the dog tags out from under my shirt and just held them in my palm at a red light, feeling their familiar weight, thinking about all the times I had trusted my instincts under fire and been right, and wondering how a hospital in North Carolina had become more dangerous to navigate than a forward operating base in Kandahar province. At home, I opened my spiral notebook to a fresh page and wrote down everything, every date, every comment, every small cruelty Marcus Reyes had inflicted since March, and beneath it, in careful handwriting, the exact sequence of events from the night Walter Combs almost died. I didn't know yet what I was building. I only knew that somebody, somewhere, was going to need to see the truth eventually, and I intended to be ready when they did. Administrative leave, it turns out, is a peculiar kind of purgatory. You're not fired. You're not cleared. You just exist in a gray room of your own life, checking your phone every hour for an email that never comes, watching your bank account tick down while your reputation gets quietly rewritten by people who were never in the room. Word travels fast in a hospital. By the second week, I noticed the way people at the grocery store, coworkers I'd worked beside for years, suddenly found something urgent in the cereal aisle when they saw me coming. Not everyone. My friend Maya Torres, a fellow ER nurse who'd covered my shifts and stolen my leftover lunch out of the break room fridge for 3 straight years, texted me almost every day. They're saying things, Sarah. Don't listen to them. I know what actually happened that night. I was standing right there. Maya became my one thread back into the building. Through her, I learned that Marcus had been telling colleagues, in that easy, concerned-sounding voice of his, that it was a shame, really, how burnout could make even good nurses cut corners. That he hated having to be the one to flag it. That he hoped I'd get the help I needed. He was building a story, a sympathetic one, for himself. The kind of story that makes a villain look like a reluctant hero forced into an unpleasant duty. I kept building mine too. Quietly. Through the state nursing board's public portal, I requested a formal copy of my own personnel file, which by law they were required to provide within 30 days. Through a former coworker who now worked in hospital IT, I learned, carefully, off the record, over coffee she insisted on paying for, that routine system maintenance on security footage almost never happened without a work order, and work orders left a digital trail even when the footage itself didn't survive. She didn't give me anything. She wasn't willing to risk her job, and I never asked her to. But she looked at me across that coffee shop table and said something I never forgot. Sarah, whatever you're building, build it fast. People like Reyes don't stop at one lie. They need the story to keep working, so they keep adding to it. And once a story like that gets big enough, it's very hard to take back down. She was right. 2 weeks later, Diane Foster called to inform me that the review committee, 3 people I'd never met, none of them present the night Walter Combs coded, had voted to terminate my employment for gross negligence, effective the following Friday, unless I chose to resign quietly with a neutral reference. A neutral reference, in exchange for my silence and my signature on a story that wasn't true. I sat on my back porch that evening with a cup of tea going cold in my hands, watching the sun go down over the pines behind my house, and I let myself, for the first time since it started, actually feel it. The unfairness of it. The 11 years I'd given that hospital. The 3 deployments I'd given my country before that. The nights I'd held dying strangers' hands in places most people can't find on a map, and now I couldn't even get someone to pull up a hallway camera to prove I hadn't lied. And then my phone rang. A North Carolina number I didn't recognize. "Is this Sarah Whitfield?" a woman's voice asked. Crisp. Formal. Military formal, though I couldn't have told you how I knew that instantly, except that some things you just recognize in your bones. "This is Major Renee Alvarez." Aide to General Thomas Hale, United States Army. The general has been trying to locate you for some time, ma'am. Do you have a moment? I nearly dropped the phone. Thomas Hale. I hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in 6 years. The last time I'd seen him, he was Lieutenant Colonel Hale, and he was bleeding out on a dirt floor in a farmhouse 40 kilometers outside Kandahar. And I was the only medical personnel within reach when the IED took out half his convoy. I remember him, I said, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. Major Alvarez's tone softened, just slightly. He remembers you too, ma'am. Very much so. I have to take you back further now, just for a moment, because you can't understand what happened next without understanding what happened first. 6 years earlier, on my third deployment, I was the senior combat medic attached to a forward surgical team supporting a rapid infantry unit in Kandahar province. On a routine resupply run, our lead vehicle struck a pressure plate IED. 3 soldiers were killed instantly. 4 more were wounded, one of them critically, a battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Hale, whose femoral artery had been torn open by shrapnel and who was losing blood faster than any field kit had a right to keep up with. I remember the farmhouse we dragged him into. I remember the dirt floor and the way the light came in sideways through a hole in the wall and the sound of small arms fire somewhere off to the east that never quite stopped the whole time I worked. I remember packing that wound with my bare, shaking hands because our supplies were thin and getting thinner, and talking to him the entire time. Not because it was protocol, but because I had learned that men don't die as easily when someone keeps talking to them, keeps pulling them back toward a voice instead of letting them drift toward the quiet. He asked me my name twice, because he kept losing consciousness and coming back. I told him twice. Sarah. Captain Sarah Whitfield. He made it. Barely. A medevac got him out 90 minutes later, and I never saw him again, because 2 days after that, my own unit rotated to a different sector, and 6 weeks after that, my third deployment ended, and I came home and quietly, deliberately, closed that whole chapter of my life like a door I didn't want to open twice. I never filed for the commendation my commanding officer told me I'd earned that day. I told him I didn't want it. I just wanted to go home and be someone who healed people without anyone dying around her first. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Thomas Hale had spent 6 years trying to find the medic who saved his life. Every promotion board, every new assignment, somewhere in the back of his mind, he'd been asking around, filing requests, chasing a paper trail that kept going cold because I'd left the Army under my maiden name and moved 3 states away and buried Captain Whitfield so thoroughly that even the VA had trouble finding me. He found me, in the end, the same way most modern miracles happen. An old comrade of his, doing a routine background check for a security clearance renewal, ran across a nursing license under the name Sarah Whitfield in North Carolina and mentioned it in passing at a dinner, and Thomas Hale, now a major general, now commanding a division out of Fort Liberty, 40 minutes from the very hospital that was about to fire me, nearly knocked his chair over standing up. Ma'am, Major Alvarez said to me on the phone that night, the general would like to know if you'd be willing to meet with him. He has some things he'd like to say to you in person. And he asked me to mention, he's aware you may be going through something difficult right now at your place of employment. He'd like to help if you'll let him. I didn't tell him everything that night. I was too stunned, too raw, too unused to anyone offering to help me instead of the other way around. I just said yes. I had no idea that meeting with him was about to mean 2 Black Hawk helicopters landing in a hospital parking lot. General Hale wanted to do it properly. A quiet, formal ceremony at Fort Liberty, an overdue commendation, a chance to finally say thank you to the woman who'd kept him alive on a dirt floor a lifetime ago. He'd arranged it for a Thursday morning, 3 weeks out, and in a stroke of coincidence that would later feel like fate rearranging itself, he decided to fly directly to my hospital first, not for the ceremony itself, but for something smaller and more personal. He wanted, Major Alvarez explained, to see where I worked, to understand the life I'd built, He was bringing a small honor detail and, out of an old habit of respecting the chain of command, had looped in the hospital administration as a courtesy, informing them a general officer would be visiting to honor a former service member on staff. Diane Foster received that notification exactly 9 days before my termination date. She never told me about it. I found this out much later, through documents that eventually surfaced in the investigation, but I want you to sit with it the way I had to sit with it. Diane Foster and Marcus Reyes knew, more than a week in advance, that a 3-star general was flying in specifically to honor Sarah Whitfield, the nurse they were actively working to fire on fabricated grounds. And instead of pausing, instead of reconsidering, instead of doing the one decent thing available to them, they moved my termination meeting up. They scheduled it for the same morning the general was set to arrive, hoping, I can only assume, to have me gone, resignation signed, story finalized, before he ever set foot in the building. They were trying to erase me before the truth could land. They just didn't know the truth was arriving by helicopter. But before any of that happened, there was one more night. The night that changed everything. The night nobody in that hospital would ever forget. The night that happened to fall exactly 2 days before my termination meeting. It started as a routine Tuesday. Then, at 9:14 p.m., dispatch radioed in that a National Guard training helicopter conducting a night exercise near the coast had gone down in a hard landing after a mechanical failure. Not a crash, thank God, but rough enough that 6 soldiers aboard were injured, 3 of them critically, and Cape Fear Regional was the closest Level 2 trauma center capable of receiving them. I was working that night. Marcus Reyes was the attending on call. 6 casualties arrived within 11 minutes of each other, and the ER became something closer to a battlefield than a hospital. Shouting, blood, monitors screaming, too few hands, and too many wounds. Marcus froze. I watched it happen, the exact moment his composure cracked, because everything he knew about trauma medicine, he'd learned in the calm, controlled environment of a teaching hospital, and nothing had ever prepared him for 6 critical patients arriving at once with no time to think between them. I didn't freeze. Something in me, something I hadn't used in 6 years but had never actually lost, simply switched on. I triaged all 6 casualties in under 90 seconds, sorting by survivability the way I'd been trained on dirt floors and dust-choked landing zones. I called out orders, not requests, orders, and to their credit, the staff followed them, because in that moment, everyone in the room could see that I knew exactly what I was doing, and Marcus, standing frozen by the doors, did not. I packed a chest wound on a 19-year-old private with my bare hands, the same way I had once packed Thomas Hale's leg, and I kept talking to him the whole time, kept pulling him back toward my voice, and he made it. He made it because for those 4 minutes, I was not a floor nurse being pushed out of a hospital on a lie. I was Captain Sarah Whitfield of the 82nd Airborne, and I had done this before, in worse places, with less. Marcus finally found his footing on the 4th patient, and to be fair to him, once he stopped panicking, he was a competent surgeon. But every person in that trauma bay that night, nurses, residents, the paramedics who'd brought the soldiers in, saw with their own eyes who had actually held that room together in the moments that mattered most. Every casualty survived. Word of that night reached General Hale's staff within hours, because 2 of the injured soldiers were under his division's command, and Major Alvarez called him personally to report that all 6 were stable, thanks in large part, the trauma coordinator's report noted, to a night shift ER nurse named Sarah Whitfield who had run triage, like she'd done it 100 times before. Thomas Hale read that name and went very still. He moved his visit up by 2 days. Which brings us back to the morning I started this story with. The morning I stood in Diane Foster's office, holding an unsigned resignation letter, while the ground outside shook with the sound of 2 military helicopters landing in a hospital parking lot that was never built to hold them. General Thomas Hale walked through that door in his dress blues, looked past Diane Foster, looked past Marcus Reyes, and said my old name and rank out loud for the first time in 6 years, and I felt something in my chest crack open that I had kept sealed shut since the day I signed my discharge papers. "You're a hard woman to find, Captain," he said, and his voice was rough now, unashamed of it. "I have spent 6 years trying to say thank you to you." Diane Foster found her voice first, because people like Diane Foster always do. "General, we weren't informed you'd be arriving today specifically. There's a personnel matter we're finalizing." "I'm aware," Hale said, and something in his tone made the temperature in that room drop 10 degrees. "My office sent notice 9 days ago. I'd like to know why the meeting to terminate this woman's employment was moved up to coincide with my visit rather than delayed." Silence. Real silence. The kind that has weight. Marcus Reyes tried to recover his footing the way he always did, with charm, with confidence, with the easy authority of a man who had never once in his life been told no and meant it. "General, with respect, this is a clinical matter, an internal review regarding a patient safety incident. It's really not appropriate to." "I read the incident report," Hale said flatly. "The one filed by your trauma coordinator 4 days ago, regarding a mass casualty event in which Captain Whitfield ran triage on 6 critical patients, including 2 of my own soldiers, and every single one of them lived. I also happen to have, in my possession, a sworn account from a Sergeant Walter Combs, who reached out to my office after hearing I was looking into Nurse Whitfield's situation, a man who says she saved his life once, and that this hospital has spent the past 3 weeks trying to punish her for it. I hadn't told Walter anything. I found out later that Maya had. Maya, who had never once stopped believing me, had quietly visited Walter Combs in his own home and told him the truth about what was happening to the nurse who'd kept him alive, and Walter, 81 years old, stubborn as a mule, furious in the specific way only old soldiers get furious, had written down everything he remembered and mailed it, by hand, to Fort Liberty, addressed simply to the general looking for the nurse. It found its way to Hale's desk 2 days before he landed. "I have that letter with me," Hale said, and he actually produced it, a folded, handwritten page, from an inside pocket of his uniform, along with a formal request that this hospital's board conduct an independent review of Nurse Whitfield's personnel file, the amended medical chart in question, and any records related to the deletion of security footage from the night of July 9th. "I've already spoken with my JAG office. They'll be in touch with your legal counsel by end of day." Diane Foster's face had gone the color of paper. Marcus Reyes opened his mouth to argue, and I watched, for the first time in 3 months, something other than confidence move across his face. Fear. Real fear. The kind that finally understands the story it built might not survive contact with the truth. This is a private employment matter," he said, weaker now. "The military has no jurisdiction." "You're right," Hale said, almost gently, which somehow made it worse. "I have no jurisdiction over your hospital, doctor. But I have 2 soldiers alive today who would be dead without this woman. A veteran who says the same thing about a night 3 months earlier, and a Silver Star recommendation for Valor Under Fire that I never got the chance to finish filing 6 years ago because I couldn't find her. I intend to finish it now, publicly, this week, and I would strongly advise this hospital to think very carefully about what story it wants attached to its name when that happens." What happened over the following 72 hours moved faster than anything I'd experienced since I left the Army. The hospital's legal counsel, upon learning that a formal military inquiry and a veteran sworn letter were both circling the same amended medical chart, did what hospital legal counsel does when the math stops favoring silence. They demanded the original, unamended records be produced immediately, along with the IT work order for the routine maintenance that had erased the hallway footage. There was no work order. There had never been a work order. The footage hadn't been lost. It had been deleted manually, on a personal request, by an IT technician who, faced with a subpoena instead of a favor for a board member's son, cracked within an hour and admitted the truth. Marcus Reyes had asked him to delete it, framing it as routine. The same week the chart was amended. Once one lie fell, the rest came down like a house built on sand. The chart's amendment history, something the electronic system tracked automatically, something Marcus had apparently never bothered to learn, showed the exact timestamp of the edit. 6:52 a.m. on July 10th, 4 hours after Walter Combs coded, and long after my original documentation had already been entered and locked. Marcus Reyes had altered a patient's medical record after the fact to shift blame for his own clinical misjudgment onto a nurse he'd spent 3 months trying to break. In the state of North Carolina, that isn't just a firing offense. That's a felony. Diane Foster, facing her own exposure for covering it up, did what people like her always do at the very end. She tried to negotiate. She called me herself. 2 days later, her voice honeyed in a way it had never once been honeyed with me before, offering reinstatement, back pay, a formal apology, if I would simply agree not to pursue the matter further, not to speak with the board, not to let this become bigger than it needs to be. I thought about Walter Combs, mailing a handwritten letter by hand because he refused to let a lie stand. I thought about the 6 soldiers who lived because I never stopped being who I was, even when this hospital tried to convince me that person didn't matter. I thought about every nurse who would come after me, who might face a Marcus Reyes of their own someday, with no general, no old comrade, no lucky letter to save them. No, I told her. I think it does need to become bigger than it needs to be. That's the only way it stops happening to the next person. The hospital board, faced with a pending felony investigation into chart falsification, a whistleblower's evidence, a veteran's sworn statement, and a very public military commendation ceremony about to shine a spotlight on the entire mess, did not have the luxury of protecting Marcus Reyes any longer, donor family or not. He was placed on immediate suspension pending the outcome of the state medical board's investigation. Diane Foster resigned within the week, before the board could finish deciding whether to fire her first. Marcus Reyes's medical license was formally suspended 4 months later, following the state board's findings. He was never charged criminally in the end. The district attorney's office cited the difficulty of proving intent beyond the documentary evidence to a jury's satisfaction, but the civil suit Walter Combs's family filed, and the public record of the falsification, ended his career in trauma medicine as thoroughly as any conviction could have. Preston Reyes's name still sits on that cardiac wing. His son's name does not appear anywhere in that hospital's directory anymore. 3 weeks after the Blackhawks landed, I stood on a parade field at Fort Liberty in a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, watching General Thomas Hale pin a silver star to a uniform I hadn't worn in 6 years, one my old unit had quietly, lovingly helped me track down and have altered to fit. Walter Combs sat in the front row in a wheelchair, wearing his own old service ribbons, grinning like it was his own medal being pinned. Maya sat beside him, because the two of them had become, in the strangest and most wonderful way, friends, an 81-year-old veteran and a 32-year-old ER nurse, united by their refusal to let a lie stand. For conspicuous gallantry and selfless service in the face of enemy fire, the citation read, and I stood there and let myself cry in front of 200 strangers, because I had spent 6 years believing that closing that door meant the person I'd been over there didn't matter anymore, and I had been wrong the entire time. She had never stopped mattering. She had just been waiting for someone to finally see her again. General Hale, after the ceremony, pulled me aside. "I have a proposition for you, Captain," he said. He'd taken to calling me that again, and I'd stopped correcting him. Fort Liberty's Regional Medical Command is building a new trauma training program for combat medics and civilian ER staff, a joint initiative. We need someone who's lived in both worlds to help design it. Someone who understands triage under fire and triage in an ER at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday equally well. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I don't work night shift at Cape Fear Regional anymore. I still work in that building. Actually, the new administration, under a board reformed after the scandal, asked me to stay on as their trauma department's clinical education director, a role that didn't exist before but exists now specifically because of what happened. 2 days a week, I drive out to Fort Liberty to teach combat trauma protocols to young medics who remind me, more than I'd like to admit, of who I used to be. Maya got promoted to charge nurse. Walter Combs still calls me young lady every time I visit him, and I visit often, because some people earn a permanent place in your life just by refusing to look away when it mattered. I still wear the dog tags under my scrubs. I don't hide them anymore. A few of the newer nurses have asked about them, and now, when they do, I tell them the truth. Not the whole story, not all at once, but enough. Enough to remind them that the quiet person next to them on a hard night might be carrying more strength than anyone gives them credit for. Enough to remind them that dignity, patience, and the truth, held long enough, tend to outlast even the loudest lies. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I still think about that day. The sound of the rotors shaking the windows, the look on Diane Foster's face, the exact moment Marcus Reyes understood that his story was about to collapse under the weight of a truth he'd spent 3 months trying to bury. I think about how close I came to signing that resignation letter, to letting them win simply because I was tired of fighting a war that never should have needed fighting in the first place. I didn't sign it. I kept it, actually, framed, blank, hanging in my new office at Fort Liberty, right next to my silver star. A reminder of the version of this story that almost happened and the one that did instead. Because in the end, this was never really about helicopters or generals or medals pinned to a uniform on a parade field. It was about a quiet woman who spent 11 years being underestimated, who kept a notebook nobody knew about, who never once raised her voice to defend herself because she trusted that the truth, given enough time and enough patience, would eventually defend her instead. It did. It just happened to arrive by Black Hawk.